What's up, everyone? Alright, let's take a look at today's agenda. So today we are going to learn about Minikube and how to install it. For example, how to deploy a very simple dummy application to your local Kubernetes cluster. And in today's video, I'm gonna show you the whole process in details. Is because I do not have Minikube installed in this computer. So I'm gonna actually start from the scratch, and in this video you can actually follow me along. You need to have Docker running on your computer. So in this case I'm gonna run my Docker desktop. So that's gonna actually run Docker. And another thing that you want to do is basically check the version of your Kubernetes kubectl command line tool. That's something I talked about in the past, but if you have not installed it, please go ahead and install it. If you're on Mac, you can just say brew install and then kubectl, okay? So I'm not gonna do that right now, but I could actually do because mine is not updated for quite some time, so I could actually do while I talk about other things. All right. So this is a version already installed and it's not just linked, so I'm gonna link it. There is some issue. What is the issue? It's already existed, so you may want to remove this. This is already existed, and if you want to do the force override, actually I could do so. Is because during the installation process I cancelled it, and this is why it caused a bit of issues. But anyway, so if you can run kubectl and then version command, you would be able to see stuff, right? So exactly you can see I have got this client version 128.4. Anyway, so what is Minikube? Minikube is basically local Kubernetes environment tool, meaning that is similar like K3D, Kind, K3s, tools like that. So it's basically meant to be helping you for your local development of your Kubernetes application. Okay, so it's basically the tool that comes with Kubernetes, right? And you could basically create cluster, you could do stuff, and you can deploy your application in there. So on your local computer, you could basically deploy your application. So that's what is Minikube is for. Okay, so that's what is Minikube for, and how to install it. So the easiest way actually you can do install Minikube is this way. I have not installed it, as I said. It's not something I have on my computer, and this has been already installed. Okay, it doesn't actually have, so it's because I actually typed it wrong. That's what you can see. So I'm gonna do it correct this time. So brew install Minikube. So it's gonna install a Minikube on my local computer. Okay, so as you can see, Minikube has been installed, and I'm gonna show you actually documentation, so it's gonna be very easy for you to follow along. And there is another video, I'm gonna talk about it after some time. So here is the Minikube documentation. Don't worry about it, I will share you the documentation later on in the video description. Alright, so it's a tool for local Kubernetes, so it's basically you could develop your Kubernetes application, right? And there are two things you could do. You could run with Docker or you can run with virtual machine like Oracle VirtualBox or similar, okay? But in this video, I'm gonna use Docker Desktop. And as I said, I have got Docker Desktop running on my computer. So if you can see, this is the application I have. All right, so if you run Docker version command, CLI command basically anyway. So this is the Docker version, as you can see, I'm running right now. And if you haven't installed, you can just go ahead and install a Docker Desktop on your computer. Anyway, so that is that. And now we're gonna look into this installation for the people who don't have Mac actually. So how are we gonna do that? You basically copy this installation script, so you can see how to do it, and install it, right? And if you are on Windows, you go ahead with the Windows. If you're on Mac OS, you can go with Mac OS. If you're on Linux or different architecture, you can go ahead with any of those that is suitable for you, okay? Once you have the installation, you could actually go ahead and start working with Minikube. So before we do anything, we want to do a bit of Minikube stuff. So how to do that? That's what I'm gonna talk about right now. So let's see. If you're not familiar with Minikube, you can just type in right here. This is what happens basically once you type in Minikube, and this is really good to get actually familiarize yourself with the tool that you are going to use. This is similar to K3D that I did some time ago. So they are talking about, you can say, if you're trying to run this on this, then like M1 chip, then you basically do this. So I'm not going to go ahead with that at this point. So what are you gonna do? How do you start a local Kubernetes cluster? This is why I talked about this video. Here I go through pretty much details with K3D. So these are like similar, but just the different tools, just to let you know. So in this case, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna walk you through quickly what are the things actually available with this tool, right? It's also good to know basically what kind of options you have, what you could do technically with Minikube. So if you type in Minikube and then you say version, you're gonna see the version of Minikube. Oh man, this is like a nightmare. I'm typing very bad. So here you can see the version I'm running is this, and this is the hash of that particular version. The other thing that you would be interested to see is basically pausing a Kubernetes cluster. You can unpause a Kubernetes cluster. You can go ahead with the dashboard. You can delete a Kubernetes cluster. You can stop, right? So there are quite a lot of things you could do. Could be interesting also for you if you want to run with Docker or Podman, for example. So Podman doesn't require a daemon. The other thing you would be interested in to look into add-ons, config, and most likely the dashboard. So I'm gonna go ahead actually and show you the stuff in a bit. Okay. So now we're gonna basically see what we have in our Kubernetes cluster, right? We don't literally have anything. We have not created any cluster literally. So we will create Kubernetes cluster as I said right here. How to install Minikube, we have seen how to install it, and then we want to create a cluster, and after that we want to basically deploy our dummy application to the cluster. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Let me jump in here. So if I say Minikube and then as I say add-ons, you could just see the list of add-ons. Add-ons are basically plugins. You can see who are the maintainers. You can see here. Let me go all the way up. Maintainers. So let's say if you want this, if you want the dashboard to be enabled, right? You need to enable it. By default is disabled. Let's say metric server here. You can see if you want to HPA, for example, that's where you need to enable them as well, maintained by Kubernetes. So Minikube, add-ons, enable, and which one you want to do. Let's say I want to say dashboard. Since we don't have any cluster, it's not gonna do anything because it's gonna say, hey, we don't have any cluster. Because we don't have any cluster, so where to actually enable it is, it says that, look, this actually doesn't exist. It has nothing to do with this, right? So at this point, we can't do really anything. So since I said to have Docker, I have got Docker, right? All right, so you can see the Docker is actually running on my computer. So I'm gonna say Minikube and then start. And as I said, virtual machine and Docker containerized environment, you can do both. So if you say driver Docker is gonna actually start the cluster with Docker. So in this case, I'm starting a Kubernetes cluster that is going to be running on Docker. Okay, so this is going to be running on Docker. So you need to say driver Docker. And I'm gonna take you to the documentation also to show you this is how you're gonna do. And if you want to set it by default, you are going to run this command. So Minikube config set driver Docker. So once you finished running this stuff, okay, so these changes will affect upon a Kubernetes delete and then a Kubernetes start. So we are basically good at this point. If you say pause, so you basically pause a Kubernetes cluster. That doesn't mean that the deployed application are going to be stopped. Okay, they are still going to be able to serve. But if you say stop, right? If you say stop, then it's basically going to halt the Kubernetes cluster, meaning that your cluster is completely shut down. You are not going to be able to serve your application. So at this point, it says that it's not able to get this stuff, which is fine. It actually did enable this stuff, which is fine. And if you look at here all the way, it just gives me a warning like if 128, which may have incompatibilities with Kubernetes version 1.20.3. So it's actually telling you that, okay, Minikube actually would be able to download the appropriate version, right? So which is what 1.22.3, which is very old version, and I'm not going to do that actually at this point. So I'm not going to run this command. So I'm going to be okay using this command. So minikube kubectl get pods. Let's see what we have. So let's say we're gonna go ahead with minikube kubectl get pods. If we have anything in there. At this point, let's see what we have. So it seems like actually it's going to get the kubectl command. Is basically, look at this, it's basically downloading it. And no resources found in default namespace, which is absolutely fine. Okay, so now you can see a couple of ports are running. So what is running? So it's basically kubeproxy, kubescheduler, storage provisioner, SCD minikube. So it's basically the database, right? Core DNS stuff. So quite some stuff's actually running at this point, and they are running in this namespace. So if I go ahead and say that kubectl get namespaces, so we're gonna see these are like basically the default namespaces. In K3D we have seen as well. Here we are also going to see. So what we have seen so far, we have a running Kubernetes cluster. So let's see what we have. kubectl get nodes. So you're gonna see how many nodes we have. We have basically one node Kubernetes cluster. So this is a control plane, basically master node is gonna actually serve your application as well, meaning that the application workload is going to be actually scheduled to this particular node as well, because we have not created any worker node. Okay, and this is the version of Kubernetes, because when I created the cluster, I did not say which, if I wanted to run with 1.28 or something, is because that's why it took the default version of Kubernetes when it orchestrated. Okay, excellent. So now we have got the Kubernetes cluster with one node. We have got 4 namespaces, and we have a couple of other Kubernetes system related services are running as well, right? Excellent. Actually, before you do that, I wanted to also show you how do you know what cluster actually you have, right? So if you want to see this is what the command you're going to run. I'm just actually showing you that how you could do it yourself. So I'm going to start with minikube, and anything you want to do with this, you can also run this command like options minikube, and these are like basically the global commands, right? So just to let you know. And let me show you something. So yesterday we started a Kubernetes cluster just saying minikube start. And if we start this, maybe we have seen that the version of Kubernetes was 1.20.22. something, I can't remember. So it was very old version of Kubernetes, right? So what happens if I want to, right now, let me show you. I do not have any cluster right now running because I deleted everything. So I could say something like this Kubernetes version, and you can say v, for example, .1.28. I think it is 28.1, right? That's the stable version of Kubernetes at this point. And if you start the Kubernetes cluster right now, it's going to create by default with one node. Before I start, actually I could start with like this. So for example, if I'm going to start my, let me jump in here. This also works. So in the documentation, you will see they start with V, but I'm going to start with this one just to let you know that this also works. And because right now we start this cluster with one node, right? And if we want to, for example, I want to show you also, if we want to start with more nodes, I could say n means node, or you can just say nodes, number of nodes, let's say 2, right? That's what you could do as well. So I'm gonna start with this one node, and after that I'm going to show you what is happening here, right here. This doesn't take much time is because it starts with Docker, right? And as you can see, creating Docker container, where is my cursor, is with 2 CPUs, memory is this much. So this is something you can also tweak, and I have enough memory in this computer. This is Mac Pro M2, so I have got 32 gigs of memory. So I'm not so much worried about this, but if you are, you could actually tweak memory and CPU configuration as well. At this point, you have seen this Kubernetes cluster is created with version 1.28.1 is because this image I pulled just a while ago, so it actually got the image from the cache, so which is why it was a little bit faster, and it gives information here that is preparing the Kubernetes with this version and is running on Docker 24.0.7, right? So let me see what has happened. So you can see multiple ways, like the name of this cluster. So if you do this, you have seen Minikube, that's the name of the cluster, and this is control plane, basically master node, so basically one node. You can do like multiple ways to see it, like you using kubectl command. You can do it like this: kubectl config use, for example, context, right? And in this case, this is Minikube. You can just type in Minikube, but I'm gonna tab on my keyboard, and you're gonna see what happens. So it's gonna suggest all my Kubernetes cluster available at this point. So this is the one it created, like a brand new Kubernetes cluster, right? So I could just say Minikube, but when you create a cluster, this is similar to K3D. It automatically switches the context, meaning that this is the context in this case, which is this Minikube cluster. So it automatically does it for you, so you don't have to do anything. So if I have done this, so it's going to switch to the context. I could do also with kubectl, that's more easy. So if I'm doing kubectl, it's going to do the same thing. And you can see it's highlighting this one, meaning that this is the current context at this point. So if you want like switch to something else, you could actually use this tool, things like that. Okay. So now let's see what we have. Let me clear the screen. kubectl and get nodes, for example. At this point, you can see I have a cluster with this particular version of Kubernetes, and this is the control plane. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna add a node in there. So Minikube, and this is the command. I did not show it to you. There is a node command, right? Node, and then I'm gonna say add. You can say worker equal 1 if you want to add one node, or you can say 2 or whatever. By default, if you don't include anything, it's going to create this particular node as a worker node and going to be attached to this Minikube cluster. So let me show you how this works. So let me do it. It doesn't take much time. It's creating one more container, right? Which is going to be acting as a worker node in our Kubernetes cluster. It says that M02 is being added to the cluster. So if I say get nodes, now I can see the role is none at this point. It's not there yet. So let's see what happens. Minikube O2 status ready, roles is nothing. If I'm going to add command, and this time I'm gonna say worker, and worker, let's say one node. This time what happens? So it's going to create one more. This is my default configuration for creating the Docker container. So you can basically tweak them anyway. So now we're gonna see get nodes. So if we do this time, it's basically none. I don't know why this is not actually updating it, but this should be like the worker node. So anyway, so this is the age. As you can see, this has been added to this particular Kubernetes cluster, right? And if you want to delete, so you can just say Minikube node, and you can say delete. And which one you want to delete? Let's say Minikube, this one I want to, oh no, maybe this one. This one I want to delete, Minikube M03. So this is the one I want to delete from the cluster, and that's how you're gonna basically delete the node from the cluster. And if I am saying get nodes, and now I can see I have got 2 nodes at this point, right? And this is the age. And then let's say this time you want to start a cluster. I will just do a shortcut so it's easy for me. Kubernetes version. Okay, so now let's say I want to create one more cluster, okay? And that cluster will have 1.25. This is the version. And there could be a situation where you want to try out your application in different version of Kubernetes, right? In your local environment, which is absolutely fine. But now we will have a problem. I'm not going to talk about it now, but I want to show it to you in the first place. So if I enter, it doesn't like it. It's because the cluster we created here, which is, this is why I actually showed you this command. Right here we have showed it to you, is Minikube. Now we are trying to create one more cluster. By default, this will create the cluster by the name of Minikube. So we did not actually put a different name. So now it's saying that, hey, you are trying to downgrade, right? So this is not something you can see. The downgrade supported, unable to safely downgrade existing Kubernetes cluster from this to this, right? So what is saying that you delete it, start a new one, or you could actually, this is the one I wanted to show you. This P flag means that you name your Kubernetes cluster other than Minikube, right? Or anything else, right? So this time you can say Minikube 2 and start this particular cluster. I'm gonna show it to you like this. So if you are doing this now, it's going to create a cluster with one node because we did not specify the number of node. So as you can see, this is going to be Minikube 2. And the context is going to be automatically switched to this particular Minikube 2.1, right? From Minikube 1. So that's how you can basically add or delete a node from an existing Kubernetes cluster. You can fire up multiple Kubernetes cluster on your local environment. So these things are very easy and simple. This is the easiest way I could think about you could do. So now if I'm saying that get nodes is, this time you can see is saying that Minikube 2, right? And it has this particular role, and this is the version of Kubernetes. Now if I want to switch this, you can say kubectl config use context. That's how you can do this. So you can say Minikube and suggested number is 2. So you can say Minikube 2. Now this is how you can basically switch. If you want to switch back to Minikube, you can, this is how you can do. So now if I'm going for, let's say Minikube, this is what I think I didn't show you to you yet. So now if you run this, you can see this is showing that this is a worker node, right? And this is the second node, this is the first node, this is the first node, right? So this is the worker M, 02 type is worker. And in this case, you can also run this kubectl get nodes, and there you can also see it as well, right? And so I could talk pretty much hours after hours about Minikube, to be honest, and there are so much of those commands that I cannot really go through all of it. Maybe I will try to do something later on, but in this video I'm not going to talk too much. But there is a lot. As you got the idea, you could do a lot more with the mounting, copying a specific file, Minikube, update context thingy for your kube configuration, cache images. There are quite a lot of things. So I did not show you. So basic commands, I just showed you how to utilize the CLI commands efficiently from the terminal. Okay. So without further ado, let's jump into the application that we talked about. So now we are going to deploy a dummy application to Kubernetes cluster.